conversation.
Yeah, oh, please don't. I
Give
get
it.
enough of that kind of stuff.
All right, so Dawn, are you with me? Are you with me? I see the mayor on the line. We do not have Christie yet. Do we want to get started without her? Is that
You
permissible?
can get started without her on a work session, absolutely.
All right, well,
And wait till Bill says he's ready to start recording. I talked to the mayor at the last meeting. We will wait to do the pledge until the council meeting from now on.
Love
Because
it.
it's just more formal.
Feels better.
So,
I also see that it's in section 3. I was thinking about that.
yeah. What is?
Hello, Trista.
Hey, good evening, all.
We will start as soon as Dustin is ready. Topic for tonight that we're covering is right-of-way maintenance and code enforcement. And thank you for your patience, Mayor. We had a little bit of logistics with seating and microphones to sort out.
No worries.
All right, Dustin Lucanati, Public Works Director. Hey, Mayor, can you see the PowerPoint presentation on your end?
One moment, it's coming up. And there it is. Got it.
Okay, so I actually had to delete a lot of information because this could cover 2 work sessions easily. And so I just condensed it as much as possible. And so I just wanted to let you know that. And if you have any questions, I'm glad to answer some clarifying questions, some simple clarifying questions as we go, but save the bulk of the major questions towards the end because I've got a lot of information to get through. So with that, tonight's really about one thing, and it's what residents expect the city to maintain in the right of way and what we can realistically provide as a city service. This is not a permit meeting. It's not about right of way management, permits, utility licensing, right of way violations. That's its own conversation for another day. And here's how I kind of want to walk through this. First, I'm going to define right of way in simple terms. I'm going to explain what's coming up, especially with the April season and our contract timing. Then I'm going to explain how we handle vegetation issues today, why it's complaint driven. And from there, I will lay out a simple responsibility framework and why maintenance agreements matter. And then I will show a map and a couple of specific examples, and I'll finish with staffing costs and some options and direction I may need from council. But I'm happy to take clarifying questions as we go. But if you have broader questions or policy discussion, please hold those to the end so I can get through this large presentation. All right, next one. What is the right of way? When I say right of way, I mean it's the public space reserved for the street and the infrastructure that supports it. Things like sidewalks, drainage, utilities, and the width varies around town. So there's not one number that always applies. This image that is on your screen is just kind of a general image of some of our local streets. But once we get into collectors and arterials, all that information changes, but that just kind of shows basic outline to what the right of way is. So practically speaking, here's the rule of thumb. If there's green space between the curb and the sidewalk, the back of the right of way is often the back of the sidewalk. You can kind of see that over here on the left, I believe. If the sidewalk is tight to the curb or curb tight, or there is no sidewalk, most of the time the back of the right of way lines up near the back side of the water meter. And so that's one thing that we try to do in town is that we place our water meters to the farthest edge of the right of way as possible. And that way, when residents have their water service lines, it just goes right up to the right of way. And so most times, 9 times out of 10, if you see the water meter, that's where the right of way line is. Not always the case, but that's what we try to do. Next page. Why this is coming up now? This is coming up for a few reasons. First, April 1st to October 31st is the noxious vegetation season, and that's when we're going to get the most calls and complaints. Second, for years, residents and property owners have asked the city to do things like mowing, tree upkeep, ditch work in the right of way. And a lot of them happened informally over time. And sometimes it has happened as part of a community beautification effort before big events like Elephant Garlic Festival. And this history has created a long-term expectation that those are actual city services. Third, from a practical planning standpoint, our annual landscape contract renews each July. And if I'm going to expand the contract or put together a broader scope of services for 2026 and beyond, I really need to define what we are maintaining and why, and I need to do that now. Next page.
Can you clarify on that? Do you subcontract out landscaping or is it all internal resources?
Right now, we have a mixture of Showplace, doing some parts around town. They're usually the more high visibility areas like the parks and our public facilities. And some of the lesser visible, areas my crew is maintaining. And I can probably get into a little bit more, later down in the conversation. Okay, how do we handle vegetation issues and safety in the right of way? I don't know if you can read those kind of code snippets. But between April 1st and October 31st, no owner may allow noxious vegetation in the right of way abutting on the property. Now, that's kind of a very abridged version of it, and it's kind of long and roundabout, but it basically means if your property abuts the right of way, it's your responsibility. There's another right of way code that says it does not obligate the city to maintain or repair any part of the right of way, but that's more specifically to utilities. And one thing that's really interesting about our municipal code is that we focus a lot on utilities and facilities, you know, and the right of way, and not so much on the property owner's aspect. And so there's a lot of overlap that we probably need to work on here in the future. And so right now, we are not policing the entire city as a whole for noxious vegetation. We run this entirely on a complaint driven basis. The reason's simple: doing it the right way takes a lot of time. We have to respond, investigate, we have to document the conditions, we have to contact the property owner, we have to track the follow-up, and then decide whether abatement is warranted and document the decision. It's a whole thing to be able to make sure someone, you know, mows their right of way. It's a fairly decent sized process. We do not have the staffing to do that proactively citywide. There's a lot of larger municipalities that have a code enforcement officer. We do not. So we basically respond to complaints as they come in. Where we do move quickly is when there's immediate safety impact in the right of way. For example, if there's a tree limb that's blocking a stop sign, or if there's a clear sight distance issue, we will address the safety issue right away, and then we'll work with the property owner about the underlying responsibility later. And this has come across in some areas around town where maybe they have tree limbs that are kind of low, but it's not a, you know, an emergency. We got to get it done now, but we will work with them and tell them, hey, let's get this work done. Next slide. All right, the responsibility framework and why the code clarity matters. A simple starting point is this: the abutting property owner or the HOA, where applicable, is the default for vegetation and landscape upkeep in the right of way next to their property. One challenge is that our code language is much stronger and clearer for utilities in the right of way than it is for property owner responsibilities, and it makes it hard to explain and hard to apply consistently. We also have a lengthy history of informal arrangements where crews have maintained areas over the years that were not clearly city property or a city asset. And that has created expectations that we just cannot keep expanding forever. If we do it for some, we have to be prepared to do it for all, or we need a clear standard. When that code does choose to maintain something that is not a clear city asset, we actually need a written maintenance agreement, and we need to identify how that is funded. Otherwise, we are setting up ourselves for ongoing confusion and conflict. Longer term, a code update may be a good step to make all those responsibilities clear and easier to understand. I do get a lot of calls throughout the year about residents or property owners like, hey, you know, the city, this is your right of way, you need to maintain it. Or, oh, by the way, the previous public works director or the previous supervisor, they maintained all this. We can't keep on doing that, especially if it's not city property and our code clearly spells out it is their responsibility.
Question,
Yes.
Councilor Weber, that makes sense, the vegetation, that's pretty clear. are there any codes that relate to grass strips? So when it's grass, do we have any, am I obligated to water it? Can I just let the grass die if I want and then I don't have to mow it and it doesn't get high in the air? How is that handled in the codes?
I have a map that I can show you with some examples later on, and so let me get through the rest of the presentation and I can come back to that. So remember that question, and if I don't get to it, hound me on it, because that's a very good question. Okay, which one are we on? Next slide. All right, how are we doing on time? I'm expecting a lot of questions, so hopefully this will work. What I will say on this one, if we are going to maintain a portion of the right of way that is not owned by the city, we need a maintenance agreement in place, and we need a funding mechanism. Otherwise, we are creating a service expectation without a formal foundation. A good example of doing this the right way is our agreement with ODOT on Highway 26. That interchange right there where the 4 planters are on each side, that's actually our responsibility. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And we actually have a written formal agreement with ODOT that describes that. I did not find this out till I think last year, just kind of looking through a lot of what our responsibilities are. Believe it or not, that's the only written agreement that I have found for the city. And I've been looking for the past few years. And so some of these other areas that we have in town that we have been maintaining, it's like, if we're gonna keep on maintaining it, we're gonna have to come up with something. Another example is, I'm working on this right now, the Ghost Creek Beaver Access and Mitigation Effort. This is a slow process because it's a multi-party situation. It includes Washington County, ODOT, Portland Western Railroad, Wasco, Sunset Terrace Neighborhood, Speed Rack, Jewett Cameron. Over there, Gordon, where there's that pond over there, we have a lot of beavers and it's causing a lot of flooding, but there's a lot of people that are involved right there and no one wants to take care of it. But the city is stepping in to make sure, because it affects city infrastructure. We've got Wasco Street that floods over there, and if we don't take care of it, it spills on over to commercial. In the last couple of years, we've been proactive enough with beavers that we've been able to at least kind of diminish the effects that's on commercial that has happened over the years. We really can't do anything over on Gordon at this point. That's the kind of where I'm trying to get with the county and ODOT to kind of really help on some of those things right now. But that's one of those expectations that, we've been doing over the years, but this kind of makes sense. But we're coordinating these, because they affect, the flooding affects public infrastructure and the public property for multiple agencies. All right, next page. I could get lost in this one for a while, and I think I'll just kind of show you a little bit and then come back. This is kind of where it goes to Counselor Weber's question on some of these issues, and I could just show you areas in town. Let me go ahead and click the link right here. Yeah. Okay, how's this going to? Do I need to go to a different?
What are you attempting to do?
Show this page, not the PowerPoint presentation, but this page.
Okay.
Yeah, we go back to let's see here.
So,
This can be too.
wait, is that? You went to the website, don't you?
I went to the website. Yeah, it was there. All right, can you hear me on this one? Testing.
Yeah.
Using Bill's mic.
Just the face up there.
Okay, it is not showing on this.
So. No, should be working.
Okay. There is a lot of windows here in the way. All these colored in areas, by the way, this is our new GIS system, IMGIS, and I am able to share a public link to certain aspects. So you don't see all of our GIS information, just the stuff that I allow you to see. And hopefully I can use this for some other things around town. If I want to show a map or whatever specifically, then I can show just whatever it is I want to see instead of everything.
Okay.
So that's kind of what this is. But all these colored areas, are areas that we maintain in some capacity in the city. And I have a legend that describes what they all do. I believe green is what Showplace maintains. The orangish color is what we maintain as a city, but some of these areas, like this area, this is McKay Creek. We have like an annual obligation to maintain it, get rid of blackberries and stuff like that. So this isn't like a weekly basis. This is the Glencoe Opportunity Area right here, if you can see that, which, I don't know if you have noticed, but a contractor has been working on clearing that. And so we have an obligation to maintain that. We've got a couple of areas that might be future areas. And they're kind of working on that. There's a pink area right there, and there's also a pink area right here that we're discussing with Washington County. Pink is potential future. We don't really know whose responsibility it's going to be.
Okay.
And that's kind of a discussion for a later point, because when Washington County comes and does their intersection improvement, one of the things that they're asking us to maintain is this area right here. Oh, gosh.
Right there, huh?
There we go. So all this area right here, by the way, did you know there's a sidewalk over here on this side of Glencoe?
Yes,
There's a sidewalk over there. I didn't realize that until the construction, like when they're doing all the design and everything like that.
on the east side,
On the east side, yeah.
it's actually paved path.
Yeah, it's all the way down there. And so that's one of the things that the county is going to move that sidewalk up higher. And then it creates a whole bunch of, retaining wall issues and trees and right of way things. It's like, what are we gonna do? Is it gonna be our responsibility? Or is it gonna be the abutting properties owner responsibility? And so this is gonna be a discussion that we're gonna have on a lot of things around town. The blue areas are places where commercial, where Showplace is maintaining it, but it's kind of disputed because we really don't have a maintenance agreement, which is kind of funny because this corner right here, that's where our city downtown sign is, but we don't have a particular maintenance agreement specifically saying that. Our entry monument sign over here is another one of those areas. I didn't mark it blue, but we don't have a maintenance agreement for that either. And so these are things that I'm gonna be working on, is making sure that we're all okay with what our responsibilities are.
I saw Lori pulling weeds.
Aw.
At it.
I did that and a few years back, I worked in front of the murals every Friday, all summer long. I loved it. I love doing it. I can't do that anymore. I don't have time to do it anymore.
So there's all these other areas, and some of these red areas right here, this is where we do beaver not mitigation, but we do a lot of beaver checks, and it's not our responsibility, but someone's got to do it because it affects public infrastructure. Here's more orange areas that the city maintains on a regular basis, usually on a weekly or 2-week basis. We've got some areas on the other side of town. I think I can get this. There's some areas on commercial that in the past, you can kind of see it over there by Oregon Canadian. We've been mowing over there by Oregon Canadian that I found out. And so we kind of stopped doing that and making Oregon Canadian mow their right of way. And that was something that we've been doing for probably 20+ years. There's other areas along Gordon that there's always people complaining, we need to mow this, we need to maintain this. This is actually the county. So I need to get with the county about, all right, whose responsibility, is this? Because they've got guardrails over there. But it's also abutting these private properties, like this whole pond area. That is part of the HOA for the Sunset, that's not Sunset, or Sunset Terrace, Wasco Sunset Terrace is an HOA, and technically that's part of that. But Clean Water Services has kind of a say in there too. So it gets really convoluted, yeah. Whoa. I do not know how I spun that, to be honest, but I spun it. Need this.
Right, so we're lost on GIS, huh?
Let me refresh it. Maybe that might help.
And just for a time track, it's 6:22.
Okay, I think I got a little bit of time.
Okay.
But anyway, I got some more blue areas, Main Street. I'll talk about this later. That's actually disputed. We don't have a contract for that. So there's some more red areas. The red areas are the areas that we've been maintaining or are expected to maintain, but there's nothing saying why. So I'll talk about some of these areas. And there's a lot of areas. If you look at as a whole, we are maintaining a lot of areas in town, and there's a lot of areas we technically shouldn't be. And so I'm trying to put a finger on that and making sure that we're doing what we're supposed to. And if there are areas that we come to decide that we do need to maintain that are not specifically ours, I need to get those maintenance agreements in place. And so I'll talk about that later. How do I stop share?
Do you know the rough, Counselor Redding here, do you know the rough estimate of the acreage we're maintaining, whether it's ours or not versus?
That's really difficult to come up with because we've also maintained a lot of ditches in town over the years, and there's a lot of ditches in town, and those are supposed to be resident responsibility as well. So that's a really hard number to put a fine number on. It does add up quickly though.
Yeah.
Sure.
Counselor Hagedorn here. Dustin,
Yes.
what percent of your labor hours are dedicated to managing areas that are not necessarily the cities?
Let me think about that and give you an answer later towards the end of the discussion, because I do have some staffing kind of notes towards the end.
Okay,
So if I don't answer your question by the end, bounce back to me on that. Just like Counselor Weber's question.
Mine doesn't get to be bounced back.
What was your question? It's a lot of information. Acreage. I think there's a way to go in here and through IMGIS and I can actually look at a table and come up with, like, there's an actual acreage on there. But it's well over probably 10, 15 plus acres. Well over. All right, we're back to great, next page. Okay. This, I don't want to get into the weeds on some of these because even some of these discussions could be its own work session in itself. And so I will very briefly talk about some of the issues like North Avenue. North Avenue is the most current and visible example of some issues with maintenance agreements. It's a developer-driven project that has been in the works for years, and it has permanent irrigation installed on both sides of the road. The maintenance responsibility has been unclear in practice, and even though the intended breakdown should have been very clear from the start, since I think 2019, whenever this whole thing was going. The north side should be HOA maintained. The center island right there, if you can see in that picture, that actually should be city. That makes sense. And the south side properties should be maintaining the planter strip next to their property. So this should go back to Councilor Weber's question about the green space and everything that is on the property. What makes this confusing is that this is on the back side of people's property. So people in, I think it's Review Place right there, this is in their backyard. And so it kind of creates some,
yeah,
some confusion. And this is where in other municipalities and cities, you usually have an HOA that will take care of that, or any of that is actually the responsibility. Doesn't matter if it's the backyard, front yard, side yard, it is still the responsibility of.
Counselor Weber, it could be talked about later, but the other important question is when that was put in, what was communicated to the homeowners when it was being built?
And that's something that I can't really find any specific written documentation. And this will kind of go to a little bit of a different point that I have later for this slide. So the south side properties should, according to our code, be maintaining the planter strip next to the property. And when you install permanent irrigation, like there was permanent irrigation on this, without clear responsibility spelled out, it actually creates a strong public perception that the city does own it. And that the city should maintain it, even though that was probably not the intent. Interestingly enough, all the water meters for the irrigation on the south side are actually over on Bryn Hill on the north side. And so it creates a lot of confusion about, billing and everything like that. And so I don't even have data, like accurate data right now for how much water we would potentially be spending if the city were to have to water and maintain all that strip on the south side of North Avenue. So I'm still trying to figure that information out. It's not easy. So with that, me and Rowan had a conversation with Lennar and Pacific Development about, because they actually came out to us and said, by the way, our maintenance period is over. We're done with maintaining, because they were maintaining it with Showplace. And when they said, we're done with maintaining, our maintenance bond is over, so they thought their intent was they're gonna maintain until the end of the maintenance bond and then hand over to the residents. Past experience for me and a lot of capital projects and development projects, when grass is established, then you contact the homeowner and basically say, by the way, it's now been established, you're responsible. This was not communicated clearly in the past from this and multiple other projects. And so this is something that we're gonna have to clear up very soon, especially with some capital improvement projects coming on the way. What Lennar Pacific Development also did in this, when we were talking about, okay, yes, it's going to be the residents' responsibility. It's like, by the way, we need to come up with a letter that we need to approve as the city, to let the residents know that this is coming. And they did not do that. They went ahead and sent a letter directly to everybody, and they actually said some things that were not very accurate, basically. And there was a lot of things that I was trying to kind of stall and wait, especially for this conversation, because, the right of way, vegetation management, like all this stuff was gonna be happening in April. And so I wanted to make sure that I had everybody notified before April that this was going to be happening. And then all of a sudden they got this letter back September saying that, yeah, by the way, this is your responsibility. The city made us do it. It's like, that's not quite what we had said, and they just went ahead and did it. So we're kind of having to fight a fire here with that. And so there's a lot of confusion about whose responsibility it is. And for future projects and everything like that, I want to eliminate that from the get-go. And so that includes, with our capital improvement projects in the future, just a lot of information to the public and say, by the way, you're going to be responsible for whatever it is that's going to happen right away, and make it very clear from the get-go. So that's one way to kind of handle here forward. Next slide. This is what happens after 20 plus years of what is happening on North Avenue right now. Same thing happened on Main Street. Main Street, all of that right of way should be maintained by the residents. But the city's been maintaining it for the past 20 plus years, and with irrigation, my guess is that the irrigation was installed to be temporary until it was all established, but then because it was there, the city just kind of kept on taking over it. But there's no agreements, no nothing in place that says that. And it's like, okay, now we were stuck with this, and now we have a lot of spaces that we had to turn off the irrigation there because it's gonna take quite a few $1,000s to fix and replace it. Because there's a leak underneath the street right now, so we have everything shut off. And so people have been complaining, well, you shut off the water, now our grass is dying, and it's like, but ultimately it's supposed to be their responsibility. But I need to come up with a mechanism of like, well, if we are going to maintain it in the future, then we need to have a way of, kind of funding it, and we need to have a maintenance agreement. There are some areas here on Main Street, especially on the corners, that have like ornamental grass and everything like that, and kind of, bark dust areas, planter strip, kind of fancy stuff. It kind of would make sense for the city to be able to maintain that. And I think, I could justify, city crews or a contractor maintaining that with the rest of the grass and everything like that. And in regular municipality, that would be their responsibility to maintain.
One correction on that, Councilor Weber, I've talked to several residents and some historians. What they say happened on Main in this area between Commercial and North is they did a beautification project. And when you look at it, you see the sidewalk weaves, they put in these special light bulbs. It was set up or light poles, it was set up so they could put hanging plants. And it was sprinklered in such a way, the city was the only one that controlled it. It was never intended, according to the old timers, it was always the city, when they put it in, said, we're gonna take care of it. And that was part of the discussion when the beautification project went in. So But again, I've never seen that in writing, but to me, that's significant information. If if the city did it with the intent to take care of it. I don't know if that's fair for us to then dump it on the citizens after the city's been doing it for 15 years.
And so that's gonna be a discussion towards the end, that there are some areas in town that are like that, and we're gonna have a discussion about what we do with that information.
Yeah.
So moving on from that, next slide. Other examples around town, I mean, we've got so many different examples around town. I mean, I could probably go show you that map for about 20 minutes of some of the places that we're maintaining. And a lot of them are just kind of like, where there may have been an HOA at one time, and then the HOA is disbanded, and so they no longer take care of that. I can't remember the name of that neighborhood that Yorkshire is, just north, that corner of North Avenue. And Shady Brook, that whole neighborhood right there used to have, from my understanding, an HOA. There's a little strip on North Avenue that I did have the contractor come over here and fix, because the contractor or the developer came in there, like, left it really messy looking. So I put some bark dust behind the people's fences so we can eliminate some of the the landscaping that's gonna be done there. But now it's gonna be, should the city have to maintain it and, weed and spray and stuff like that. If you look on Shady Brook going towards Yorkshire, there is also a sidewalk on that side. And typically,
Paved again.
and typically that would be the abutting property owner's responsibility, or the HOA. Also, that's another confusing area, because Shady Brook is the county. And so there's a lot of expectation that the city has to maintain that and everything. And so we kind of have to fight back and forth with, the county, and okay, whose responsibility really is this? And so, yes, that area has gone overgrown, but technically that's county. And so if people have a question about that, they can really call the county until we figure out, whose maintenance responsibility is. But there's like random places around like that all over town. There's the Oak Meadows down on Pacific, where, it's a community right there, and we've been mowing the ditch there for 20 plus years. That technically is either each of the individual homes' responsibility, or the HOA, because they still have an HOA there at Oak Meadows, their responsibility as a whole. Because, we do not do ditches. And that's not a Clean Water Services responsibility either. One of this kind of goes into a further right-of-way question, is that with those ditches, there's a lot of people in town that are filling in those ditches without right-of-way permits. And that's causing flooding issues, and it's causing a whole bunch of, those are the things that I'm more worried about. And of course, we're trying to get sidewalk programs in the future, but we can't just slap a sidewalk in and call it good. We have to get with Clean Water Services for all the storm water and the curbs and everything like that. And so that kind of elevates the price of those simple, what seemed like simple sidewalk projects. But there's tons of examples. If you look right here on this corner of, West Union, Glencoe, Commercial, you see the landscaping wall on the right, where we technically don't have an agreement with the Richards property and everything like that. And last I heard is that maybe we had an agreement with the NPEA that they were going to maintain it, but I'm like, I don't see any of the documentation. And it doesn't mean it's not there. It's probably one of those things that never made it over to the computer and is probably hidden in, the written archives someplace. So when I say there's no written agreements, there's a slight chance that there might be, but they're probably buried. And if they're there, great, then we've got some, something to go off of. If you look over on, I know this is looking south, like you're going towards Highway 26. That little area to the left would be the boardwalk. Now, everything along the boardwalk, when that kind of makes sense for the city to maintain, but that right of way along that strip right there, we technically, that's not city property. That's a private empty lot over there. And I've been trying to contact the property owners for a while about maintaining their lot, but the city has been maintaining a very large stretch of that right of way for years, especially where those trees are that are kind of going out as, kind of getting older and potentially dying right now. But the city has been maintaining that for 20 plus years, but it's not city property. It's not city right of way. Once again, it's also county. And so it kind of gets into that weird, gray area. And so what I have had the crew do, it makes sense because we've got a park bench right there, and we've got the entrance to the boardwalk. The crew maintains like a really narrow strip now, as opposed to a huge like 100-foot strip like they've been doing for years. Just to kind of keep peace, more of just right there by the sidewalk. So we're just doing kind of minimum effort. But there's places like that all over the city, and you wouldn't think that we're doing it, but we're out there doing it. And just those little pieces just add up over time. Next slide. Okay.
Just for a quick time check, it's 6:38. We've got about 8 slides remaining.
Okay, I think I can skip over some of the stuff that's in here. So I understand that landscaping is one of the most visible, services that the residents notice. And it's almost a thermometer for how people feel about, the public works capacity, or it's like a thermometer of how well public works is doing. Because when the landscaping starts to slip, that's meaning like we are overburdened and we're overtasked, because that's the first thing that drops, because it's the most time consuming thing that we really have, but also in the public works mindset is the least priority. However, in the public mindset, everything's got to look pretty, but we are worried about maintaining a lot of the infrastructure and facilities that a lot of people don't see, that makes, that has more impact than something that you do see. And so we got to find a fine balance about, what do we need to keep on maintaining on a regular basis. And that's why I have Showplace maintaining the high visibility areas and all those other areas that are not so high visibility. And if we skip a few mowings here and there, people don't complain about that as much. But the high visibility areas, contractors still working on that on a regular basis. So the reality is that landscaping is time consuming and often becomes the first thing delayed when we have a busy week. That's because our priority spec starts with water, emergency response, streets, facilities readiness, and our fleet. Those are the services that actually keep the city operating safely on a day-to-day basis. I was going to go into a little bit of staffing, and it's me and 4 crew members, and we are doing a lot around the city, and we don't typically spend a lot on landscaping anymore, but I could, if you do everything in-house, it's potential that I could have one person full-time all year, doing everything from, mowing, to irrigation control, to our leaf program, to watering the plants during the summer, to doing small projects during winter, blackberry cleanup. That's enough for one person. I'm potentially another part-time person. So that's easily staffing between $100,000 and $120,000 a year just for, having someone, do just landscape type stuff. And so I have a contract right now that's just under $50,000 a year that Showplace is doing for under $50,000 a year. If I want Showplace, or I'm probably going to have to go out to bid now because it's going to reach that 50,000 threshold. If I'm going to go over and expand our work, it's going to go out to bid, and it's probably going to be close to $100,000 to $150,000 a year, but it's going to be basically a contractor that they've got a team ready to go and they'll have everything done. And that leaves our crew free to do all the other things around town. And so that's one of the things that I'm looking at and why this is kind of important. It's like, what do we need to do? What areas can we nix? What areas do we need to keep? What maintenance agreements that we need to keep on going with? And I think it's kind of the mindset that I want you all to kind of leave today. Next one. Hidden costs, water. For example, I don't want to get into the details on some of this stuff because these are some items that me and Bailey are working on with how much are we actually spending on water on city properties? Because it's not been a like, oh yeah, we're getting money from everybody else and we're taking care of all that, but how much are we actually spending with the city between this and some of our water? Like we do a lot of water flushing and everything like that, and we have to make sure that we are keeping track of our water loss compared to what we get in from Georgia Water Commission. So this is kind of an interesting case study with Sunset Ridge West Park. This is one of those parks that was HOA owned and maintained, and then the city took over. And what I had found out, through this whole process is that the HOA was, they were paying $894 a month in 2024, for show police. And if you have been to that park, it's a very well-maintained park, more so than a lot of our facilities. My crew could not handle that. And so that's when I started looking into contract services in the first place. And then we got into looking, with the HOA, it's like, oh yeah, by that way, how much are we spending on water? We're spending $7,000 a year on water. The HOA was spending $7,000 a year on water to maintain that park. And so overall, we're spending about almost $18,000 for maintenance and water just for Sunset Ridge Park. And so that's a hidden cost that people don't really think about that. Now think about, we have Jesse Mays, and we have how many pocket parks around town. I mean, if you think about all of that, it adds up over time, and we need to accurately, forecast this. And is this something that our crew can do, or is this something that is better managed by a contractor? And so this is what I'm really working out. So all this hidden cost with water is, it's not just the cost of water from Joint Water Commission. There's inspection, there's testing, there's repair, there's troubleshooting. And we've been starting to track our city water use more deliberately so we can better reflect all of that here in the future, and just kind of better transparency and accountability. Another example I kind of mentioned over there on North Avenue. The irrigation line is broken, and that's probably going to cost, maybe $5,000 to $8,000 to fix right there. And so that's one thing, it probably more, because now we have to dig into the road and find the leak. And so there's all these hidden repair costs and everything with irrigation that's in the right of way that do we want to keep on that cost or not. Next slide. Okay, I can probably breeze through the next couple of slides. Summary of staffing and budget impact. The complaint-driven enforcement already consumes a lot of staff time during the summer. We're short on staff, we're short on time. And if the city wanted to have a proactive enforcement approach, it would require additional staffing and funding, and that's its own conversation. And so I kind of cut down a lot of my presentation that was going to deal with right-of-way enforcement and code enforcement and the right-of-way. Right now, it's only complaint-driven, and that's going to be how it is going to be for the foreseeable future until we get more staffing. And for tonight, the key point is whatever service level that the council wants, the scope has to match it. If we expand maintenance informally, we expand workload costs without a plan. If we keep maintaining non-city areas without these agreements, we build expectations from the city. And then there's going to be surprise costs that are going to be hard to unwind in the future. Next slide. What I need from council tonight is more or less direction. First, what service level do you expect for the right-of-way landscape maintenance, and what areas should be in the city scope and why? Second, if there are areas you want the city to maintain that are not true city assets, things like on Main Street, we need to be clear that a written maintenance agreement needs to be in place, and a funding mechanism needs to be in place, and that they're part of the decision. I want to flag that these maintenance agreements take time. They involve coordination, legal review, and multiple parties. If the council wants a maintenance agreement approach, we need to plan for the workload required to implement that. In the longer term, council may also want staff to bring back code clarification updates, like I was mentioning before, what the utilities do in the right of way versus what property owners do in the right. If we need to do that and do a code update, that's something that we could do in the future, but I kind of need the direction for that. Next. So here are the practical ways to deliver the service level that the council wants probably. A full landscape contract sets a clear service level and it reduces variability, but it comes with a cost and an ongoing contract and contract management. A partial contract like what we have now, plus the city crew is the best fit for now, while we are right sizing our department and we're still stabilizing our roles. It keeps the highest visibility areas covered with the contractors doing the high visibility areas while we rebuild our internal capacity. getting a full contract price is also useful because it helps us understand what a complete service level is going to cost us. If council ever wants to transition fully in-house, if we want to do all internal crew, that contract price, if we get a full contract price, this becomes a benchmark for what the crew would need to take on. Realistically, a full in-house program would likely require one dedicated full-time employee to handle landscaping and minor projects, including summer watering, irrigation maintenance, and shifting to winter programs like leaf pickup and part-time winter needs, and potentially a part-time staff member. With that, now, questions, and actually, I have one more slide.
One more slide.
This is, I was aligning everything to the strategic pillars and our budget priorities, and I just kind of laid it out right there. This is kind of this, why I'm doing this, trying to align with our pillars and priorities. And next slide should be comments, questions.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure several counselors are burning to ask questions of you, and I am as well, but I wanna, maybe we start at the end of the table and work our way down. Mr. DeForge, do you want to start?
Sure, Counselor Forge here, I guess I'll start off with our budget, which I think was the foundation for this conversation. So when we set the budget, did we agree to service reductions?
When I developed the budget, I developed the budget in mind with potentially hiring a full contract service. And that would be for a 2-year budget. I can't remember what the exact amount was, but I think it was $150,000. And I was expecting about maybe $75,000 a year. That's kind of what I was estimating, but I knew that it was going to take time for the contract to come in place. So there's kind of some buffer in there. A lot of the contract was going to be the last part of the 2025 budget fiscal year into the next year. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think what I'm trying to understand is, I think when we did the budget, we didn't have a consensus about the service reduction. So I'm just trying to make sure that when we did the budget, and we gave you the funds to do that, this is now consistent with that, or are we also going to adjust the budget?
I think if I'm hearing your question right, Counselor, were these plans to cut the right-of-way maintenance that we've been doing part of my plan? Yes and no. They were kind of like, they were in there, but I didn't know what our direction was going to be. And I was trying to budget for both scenarios. And so hopefully that makes sense. But overall, like if we do need to do these budget reductions, they would go with our city code, to be honest, and they make sense. Like I would have some justification to make these reductions because that's what our city code says.
Counselor Redding here. Do we have standards for right of way? Like if someone decides they're just gonna let it die, or if a tree dies, do they have to replace it? Or if they choose to put a planter box out there? Do we have standards for, maintained right of ways?
The standards are very loose for property owners. They're a lot more strict for
City.
for utilities. So utilities, if they mess things up, they're responsible for repairing it. That is very clearly spelled out on the utility side. On the resident side, it's not so clear. It is kind of vague, and it's more of don't let obnoxious weeds and vegetation and everything spill over into your neighbor's yard more than anything. But then the right-of-way code kind of mentions things like sidewalk and trees and minor things like that. But as far as what goes into the right-of-way, can you put a planter in there? Can you put a sprinkler system in there? Can you, what trees, do you need to put in there? There's like an approved tree list for the county. There's a lot of things that is not currently specified, and it's very vague in our current code. And also, if a individual wants to cut down their tree, we don't have a code that actually says they must replace it. However, in a new development, if a tree is put down, there is a maintenance bond for that tree, and that tree is required to be replaced by the contractor within that 2-year maintenance bond. But there's nothing that says what happens to that tree after that maintenance bond, the developer and the contractor leaves. And so that is an issue that comes up very frequently where people are asking to remove their trees and they don't want to replace it with another tree. And the only guidance that I give at that point is I highly recommend that you replace it with an approved street tree, but I don't say you must, because that is not spelled out in our right of way code.
Is this part of planning commission's code rewrite at all?
Potentially.
Potential. And then, just from my perspective, we really need to nail down any past agreements. I feel bad, you know, especially on Main Street where we said potentially, but also I don't want a clause here and a clause there. I understand getting a uniform policy as well. So that's just my,
For now, that it's gonna be status quo, for Main Street, where Showplace is the one that maintains that. For now, it's the status quo, but technically we really shouldn't be.
Mhm.
And this is a discussion that, you know, we'd have, like, do we need to stop that? But you have to keep in mind, if we do it for some, be prepared to do it for all. Because that is kind of how it's with North Avenue right now. People are expecting us to maintain it because Showplace was maintaining it, but Showplace was maintaining it because that was a developer-driven thing. And so it gets really convoluted over time, and we need to stick to something that's consistent.
6:54, just a quick time check. I know Dawn has a lot of questions. I see his notepad.
Counselor Weber, it's a very healthy discussion. I think we have to distinguish though, where we have grass in the strip, because we can't make people water it. I've talked to lots of people on Main, lots of people on North, they're not gonna take care of the grass if we try to make them. So what I'm a fan of, in the meantime, I think the city's gonna have to do it till we get this figured out. That I've talked to a lot of people, it seems pretty clear to me, the city said they would take care of Main. That strip, they're the only ones that control the sprinklers. The sprinklers don't connect to the residents. They've been doing it ever since the project went in. I think we gotta keep doing it. There's no way around it. Now, could we get that to be lower maintenance down the future, take grass out, put in vegetation or bark? That's a different discussion. I also think we're gonna have to, at least for a year or so, take care of the north. You know, my concern is none of the neighbors were talked to. I've talked to 2 or 3 of them already. All of them, if it came to them, would have said, I don't want grass, I don't want sprinklers, make it no maintenance. So to be honest, that's on the city. We were a part of that whole process. So we just gotta own up to that. I think in the short run, we have to commit to take care of it and then decide where we go from there. But I would not feel comfortable in either of those cases arguing legally we can dump it on you, but in fact, we've never talked to you about it. We dropped the ball a little bit. And that's very unfortunate because that's a cost on us in North. But I don't see any way around it. That's on us. And if we don't do that, all that grass will die. I haven't talked to any of them that are gonna water it. Some of the trees will die. And that's just kind of embarrassing that we spent all that money. So anyway,
One kind of clarification to that, Councilor Weber, is if that is the decision council wants to move forward, we're gonna have to have a maintenance agreement with everyone that is along those areas. And in that maintenance agreement, we can spell out, we are going to maintain for this particular amount of time, and then maybe have like a sunset and say after that time, you maintain. That's an option that we could go with. But regardless, we're gonna have, if we want to do it the right way, we're gonna have to have a maintenance agreement for that.
I'll be real fast. I'm in alignment with Councilor Weber's direction. We do need to have a short-term, long-term plan, a maintenance agreement. And I think long-term, we need to sort out or package up a scope of work. It seems like you have 3 work streams. You have, there's a little bit of a battle of who gets the responsibility. We need to establish a plan of record there. That might help if we have a prioritized list and based off of maybe scale of magnitude of animal acreage, time, staffing time. by property, et cetera. I also see a work stream around the code maintenance. And it sounds like you maybe have some ideas of what areas that we can improve current codes or add new codes. And I think that would be a opportunity for us to add to a to-do list.
Counselor Papen, I'll keep mine brief as well. Just a clarifying question for Dustin. Is the discussion for $150,000 a year for a potential landscape bid, is that all encompassing or would that still require city staff time?
That would still require a little bit of city staff time. But at the same time, I'm trying to figure out the scope of a full service, because is that going to include irrigation, inspection, repair? Because that's kind of the unknown cost that I have not figured in. I do have crew that can do it. But it's more of, do I need to contract that portion out? So I need to figure out what it is that we can afford, if that makes sense.
Okay, and then as far as figuring that out, is there a timeline? Is that, I don't know the process, but is that something that we can feasibly see bids going out within the next few months and come back to visit this at another work session?
Since it's going to be most likely a bid, I'm gonna have to come up with a big package, and it clearly spells out what every property's responsibility is. And if we're gonna do that with these potential areas, let's say on North Avenue or Main Street that we don't have maintenance agreements with, like I need to have that spelled out in a contract like that. Otherwise, I can just keep on kind of rolling along with the minimal contract that I have. And that's kind of my option that I have in there that makes sense now. Hope that makes sense.
Would it be possible to get bids on parity, what parity looks like financially, and then what the full meal deal package looks like, and then bring that back to council?
I can probably ask for, different bid packages, one with, the irrigation stuff, one without, or one, like I can kind of do an à la carte kind of, bid,
I think
for those
so.
kind of things.
Only because, while I appreciate the tour on the map, we don't really have a good judgment call in terms of scale of size, magnitude of labor, that it costs your staffing.
Yeah, for city crew, a lot of it's not the acreage, it's the mobilization and moving from point to point is the big issue.
Okay. Well, we're at
Yeah,
6:59.
Council President.
Just as the mayor has a question for you.
Sorry, I just have a couple comments and I'll keep it brief. Doesn't appreciate this. I agree with what council's saying, but I will say, before I would vote to spend any more money or to make any other changes, I would like to see this in code. I'd like to have the code cleaned up, so that we don't end up in this situation in the future. Getting it done, having a plan before we start spending money is generally a wise idea. I also think we need to codify who actually owns the right of way, because if the city owns that, then there's a legal argument to be made that the city maintains that. If the person in front of it owns it, then there's a legal argument to be made the other way. So I would just say the code would be my key priority. And then beyond that, I'd like to see, a little bit more specifics. And also I think this is something that we need to deal with in the offsite, coming up in March on priorities as we start doing the SMART goals for that. So thank you, and I'll let you get back to the regular meeting.
Thank you, Mayor.
Trista, Counselor Stephen, you sure?
Yeah, you're good. I think I'll make it quick. I think I'll make mine very quick, but I just wanted to say, I see both sides of residents stating that this has been a long-term scenario. However, I would also either like to see something in the archives that states that this is, a beautification project that the city would be owning. And if not, to have a really clear timeline of, hey, 90 days, 6 months, and then it is the residents' responsibility. Thank you so much.
I hope that the feedback you received tonight is fruitful and helpful, and we look forward to continuing the conversations on that note. Work session is closed. We will resume council at 7:05.
Thank you, Dustin.
Good evening, on the cable.
No, I gotta be 5 inches, but I don't. Right,